Did you get lost on your way to the antique store? Grandpa. The taunt cut through the blistering Nevada air like a crack of gunfire. Cadet Ryan Keller, barely 19 and brimming with unearned swagger, flicked his hand toward the long cloth-wrapped rifle clutched by Elias Monroe. The old man didn't answer. 78 years had carved deep lines into his face, but his pale eyes stayed fixed on the heat-shimmering targets downrange. Around him stretched a desert of crisp digital camouflage uniforms, yet he stood apart, a lone figure in faded denim and a weathered jacket, a living contradiction at Falcon Ridge Training Complex. The cadets smirked, trading whispers. To them. This was community outreach theater, a chance to gawk at a relic before returning to the sleek sniper rifles of their generation. Cadet. Keep it respectful. Sergeant Morales barked. Though the boredom in his voice betrayed the lack of conviction, he saw Monroe as nothing more than a fragile box to tick before resuming real training. Morales stepped closer, dripping condescension. Sir, this is a live-fire sniper range, not the safest place for a man of your years. The pause was deliberate. Elias rested both hands on the cloth bundle, knuckles scarred, veins raised but steady as stone. Slowly, he turned his head, meeting Morales' gaze without a word. Silence pressed heavier than the rifle cracks from the adjacent lanes. Keller, emboldened, jabbed a finger at the frayed patch sewn on Monroe's jacket, a simple circle. Barely visible. What's that supposed to be, your bingo club emblem? The young men chuckled, mistaking arrogance for strength. Monroe remained motionless, his stillness more dangerous than fury. They thought they were circling prey, but they had no idea they were prodding a sleeping predator. Every viewer adds to this mission. Drop your city in the comments and lock in your subscription because the next shot might change everything. They thought they had cornered a relic. In truth, they had awakened something far older, far sharper than they could comprehend. Sergeant Morales, sensing the tension, decided to twist the knife. To him, this was theater, an easy way to prove to his cadets that war had evolved, that yesterday's warriors were just ghosts in the sunlight. All right, gentlemen, Morales announced, his smirk visible even beneath the brim of his cap. Let's give our guest a chance. Pick a lane. Old-timer. Targets are set at 800 meters. Think you can see that far? The cadets erupted with laughter. Careful you don't break a hip on the way down. Keller sneered, his voice pitched just high enough for everyone to hear. Elias Monroe didn't answer. He walked past the row of state-of-the-art sniper systems, sleek M2010s and Barretts lined like black predators beneath the desert sun. He didn't spare them a glance. Instead, he stopped at an empty lane and placed the cloth-wrapped bundle on the bench. His fingers, scarred but steady, worked with ritual precision. The laughter faltered as the bundle fell open. What emerged wasn't a prop for a museum. It was a rifle that had breathed war, an XM21 wood darkened with age and sweat, the stock polished smooth where cheek and hand had worn grooves through decades of use. Is that thing even zeroed? One cadet muttered. My dad's got one hanging over the fireplace, another whispered, grinning. I'll bet $100 he can't even hit the berm, Keller added. Cocky as ever, Morales folded his arms, savoring the contrast, the relic with his wooden stock against the Army's future armed with carbon fiber and glass. Sir, sure you don't want a spotter? The words carried a thin veil of insult. 800 meters demanded another set of eyes. To go without was arrogance or madness. Monroe shook his head. His voice rumbled, low and steady. I'll manage. Then he lowered himself to the earth, not with the groan of age, but with the smooth precision of a man returning to his natural element. The cadets stilled, unease gnawing at the edges of their mockery. The range had fallen silent, and that silence was about to break. On the firing line, the cadets still laughed, blind to the weight of history standing 10 feet away. Elias Munro settled into the dirt with the fluid ease of someone who had made his bed on the earth too many times to count. His rifle was older than their father's, its wooden stock scarred yet steady. The patch on his jacket, barely a ghost of color, now lay quiet against the sun, up in the observation tower. Colonel Adrian Locke lowered his binoculars and cursed under his breath. He had come to Falcon Ridge for a routine inspection, a box to check before paperwork, but what he saw through the glass froze the blood in his veins. That patch, that circle. Locke adjusted focus, his hand trembling despite decades of control. He had seen it before once. Long ago in a folder stamped "Eyes Only," a Medal of Valor nomination, shredded by black ink and redactions. 4 names had been listed. 3 were crossed out as KIA. Only 1 had survived. Munro, Elias J., the Ghost Talons, a sniper detachment that didn't exist, at least not on record. They had operated in the jungles of Caladur, missions buried so deep the Pentagon denied their funding. Rumors whispered of kills measured not in meters, but in miles. Men who disappeared into foliage and re-emerged with empires shaken. Officially, they were erased. Unofficially, they were legends told in mess halls when the lights went dim, and now, impossibly. One of them stood on Locke's range. He snapped to his aide, voice sharp as steel. "Get me General Helena Cross. Direct line." The aide blinked. Confused. "Sir." "Protocol." Now Locke seized the phone himself, stabbing the keys. The line clicked, and a gravelly voice answered. "General Cross." "Ma'am, this is Colonel Locke at Falcon Ridge. You need to get down here immediately. Has there been an accident?" Her tone was casual, edged with annoyance. No accident. A catastrophe waiting to happen. His eyes stayed locked on Munro through the glass. He's wearing the Kestrel patch. Green circle. Ghost talons. The silence that followed was heavy enough to choke. For 5 long seconds. Only the hum of electronics filled the tower. When Helena Cross finally spoke, her voice had changed. All casualness was gone, replaced by something clipped, urgent and cold. "Locke, hold your position. Do not interfere. I'm on my way." "Below." Sergeant Morales still smirked. Cadet Keller still whispered bets. But the colonel knew the ground had shifted. What the cadets thought was a joke had just become a classified emergency. Engines roared across the ridge. Breaking the silence, cadets had mistaken for control. A black command vehicle climbed the dirt road, flanked by 2 Humvees. Dust spiraled like smoke, curling into the sharp Nevada light. Every cadet straightened, confusion clashing with dread. This wasn't routine. The convoy braked hard at the edge of the range. Military police fanned out with crisp efficiency, weapons slung but presence undeniable. No blaring sirens, no banners, just authority arriving fast. Cadet Keller's grin cracked into panic. Sergeant Morales shifted his stance, jaw tightening as though he already felt the weight of a reprimand pressing down. From the lead vehicle stepped General Helena Cross. She didn't rush. She didn't linger. Her presence carried urgency, stripped of theatrics. A general did not belong on a training range unless the situation had shifted from exercise to incident. Colonel Adrian Locke hurried to meet her. "Salute sharp." "Ma'am." I tried to contain Cross's hand, cut the air, silencing him. Her eyes locked on the prone figure still at the firing line. Elias Munro hadn't moved. He lay steady behind the old XM-21 cheek pressed to worn walnut, as if the world around him were only noise and wind. The cadets' whispers turned frantic. Why would a general come for this old man? What was he to her? Cross advanced until she stood just behind the firing berm. Not a parade ground approach. Not ceremony, simply the shortest distance between a question and its answer. She stopped, boots planted, eyes on the faded kestrel patch stitched to Elias's sleeve. Her voice carried low, edged with something uncharacteristic for an officer of her stature. Reverence. Monroe. That single name froze the cadets more effectively than any shouted order. Keller's breath caught. Morales's hands opened and closed at his sides. Helpless, they didn't understand, but they knew they had crossed into ground where their ranks and stripes meant nothing. Locke felt the silence like a blade. He had heard whispers in classified briefings, the ghost talons, a sniper unit buried in redacted reports, men whose service was never recorded, whose actions shifted battlefields without credit, and one name surfaced again and again in hushed tones. Monroe. General Cross drew in a measured breath. She did not salute, she did not bow. But the set of her shoulders, the precision of her posture, conveyed what words could not: recognition, respect, a rare debt acknowledged in full view of those too young to grasp its weight. The cadets stared, caught between fear and awe. Every insult they'd hurled at the old veteran now echoed back at them, hollow and cheap. Elias lifted his head at last, eyes calm as desert stone. He did not look at the general. He looked straight through the cadets who had laughed at him. Gaze neither cruel nor forgiving, just steady, as if measuring them for something they could not yet name. Cross's voice hardened. This range is no longer an exercise. From this point forward, every order here runs through me. The MPs tightened formation. Morales paled. Keller's throat worked around words he couldn't form. Elias settled back into position, finger brushing the trigger. The line held its breath. The next shot would not be practice. It would be revelation. The siren died. Engines ticked in the heat. MPs spread into a quiet cordon as General Helena Cross stepped onto the hardpan. Not with ceremony, but with purpose. No parade. No flourish, just authority moving fast because something sacred might be mishandled. On the line. Elias Monroe didn't look back. He settled his cheek into the worn groove of the XM-21, breath slow, eyes reading mirage and wind like an old language. Cadet Keller swallowed. The joke curdled in his throat. Sergeant Morales forced his arms to fold, then unfold. A man discovering there are postures that no longer fit. Cross stopped 6 paces short. Gaze on the frayed kestrel patch. When she spoke, it wasn't for the range. Mr. Monroe, a simple acknowledgement. Respect without pageantry. The shot broke like a verdict deeper than the cadets' rifles. A sound with years stitched into it, 800 meters downrange. The hostage target's center disappeared in a puff of dust and paper. No one cheered. They just remembered how to breathe. Elias worked the bolt, a metallic click that felt like a period at the end of a long, private sentence. He stayed prone, not milking triumph, only letting the quiet sit. Cross raised a measured hand, not a display. Not theater, just the salute a commander owes to a man whose file lives in locked drawers and unlit hallways. Elias answered with a small, exact motion, debt paid, both ways. Then the reckoning. Cross turned, voice even and cold. Sergeant Morales, you ran a spectacle instead of a range. You'll report to my office at ZO600. You're relieved. Cadet Keller, her eyes pinned him, you'll restart with day 1. Learn the difference between confidence and contempt. No yelling, no threats, only the clean finality of orders. She faced the class. You train to hit what you aim at. Today, you learn to honor what stands beside you. She let the words hang. This man's unit isn't listed in your manuals. That doesn't make it less real. It makes your obligation to show respect more serious. Elias finally rose. Dust clung to his knees. The desert glare softened the years in his face. He looked at the cadets the way a storm looks at a valley it's already passed through without malice, without apology. "You're taught to find the target," he said, voice low. "Steady. Don't forget the person. If you lose the person, you lose yourself. The rifle won't save you from that." Keller's chin trembled. He nodded once. The first true thing he'd done all day. Orders rippled. MPs eased the perimeter. Cross and Locke spoke in hushed tones, the kind that never make it into transcripts. Elias tucked the rifle back into its cloth, the gesture careful, almost kind. He walked off the line without ceremony. The dust folded behind him. Weeks later, the fix was quiet, not theatrical. Morales gone. The class spent evenings in a small auditorium listening to living history, not numbers, names. Keller sat front row, taking notes like a penance. Months later, in a diner that smelled of burnt coffee and second chances, Keller slid onto the stool beside Elias. "Sir, thank you, and I'm sorry." Elias nodded, the smallest of smiles creasing weathered skin. "Sit, eat." They didn't talk about records. They talked about responsibility. Marksmanship can win a day. Character decides the life you live after it. Don't just learn to hit the target, learn to see the human being. Or the best shot you ever take will still miss what matters.